Hello and welcome back to Psychology. I'm Miss Lee and we are here together for the very final video in Unit 1. This is Section 6, Experimental and Ethical Issues. If you have not done so already, go ahead and grab your notes. What we're going to be covering in today's lesson is the experimental research method and all about how to improve the validity of research findings while we're doing experimental research. It's a little bit different than what we've talked about in previous videos. And we're going to wrap up this unit with ethical guidelines, both for human studies and studies including animals. When we're discussing the experimental method, an experiment is a controlled scientific procedure to determine whether certain variables manipulated by the researcher have an effect on other variables. Controlled means that you take into account outside influences that could influence your results and make things as equal as possible. If you will recall, this is the only way that a researcher can truly state whether a variable has a causal effect on the variable that is being measured. It's the only method that we use as psychological researchers to determine cause and effect. So there are two variables in a research experiment. The first one is an independent variable. This is the variable that researchers are trying to determine whether it causes a change. The dependent variable is the thing that's being measured. And so it is the one where you are looking for changes, you're looking for improvements, you're looking for anything that will let you know that manipulating the independent variable has made a difference. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in real life. If we have a research question, can warm temperatures cause aggression in humans? What do you think the variables could be? Well, the independent variable is going to be the temperature. This is the thing that the researcher would manipulate. And the dependent variable, the thing that we would be measuring, is the level of aggression. Now we're going to talk about the different groups. There are experimental groups and control groups. Sometimes the control group is called the comparison group. The experimental group are the participants who receive the treatment. The control group is the group that does not receive the treatment. In a controlled experiment, both the experimental group and the control group are present. Let's talk about what this looks like in real life. Our example here, do extracurricular activities make a difference in grades? You want to take into account all factors such as educational background. You want to make sure it's the same for all members. We're going to get more into that in future slides. But first of all, your experimental group is the group that receives the treatment. It is the group that's going to be involved in activities. The control group is not involved in activities. So when you're thinking about how this would apply in psychological research, would it be possible to conduct a controlled experiment related to mental health treatment? So our research question in this scenario is, do people who undergo therapy feel better or feel better faster than people who do not? Is it possible to set up a research experiment to determine whether or not mental health treatment helps people feel better? Could you also compare different types of treatment? The answer is a very resounding yes. This is actually how we determine what clinical measures and treatments are best for different types of psychological disorders. There are aspects of setting up your research study that will help with validity and reliability. The first is a placebo. This is a substance or treatment that has no known effect apart from a person's belief in it. I usually think of that like a sugar pill. It doesn't have any medicinal purposes. So this is the thing that's given to the control group. Why would we have a placebo? Well, think about it. If you don't have a placebo, you know you're not getting the treatment, and so you know you're part of the control group. Does that affect things? It usually does. Single-blind studies are another way an experiment can be set up methodologically so that we get better results. An experiment that's set up as a single-blind study is an experiment in which participants don't know whether they're in the experimental group or the control group. If we are doing a research study to determine whether a new medicine to treat depression is effective, the single blind study is where the participants do not know whether they are receiving a sugar pill or the real experimental medicine. A double blind study is even better. This is an experiment where neither the participant nor the actual researcher knows who got what. It is documented, so don't freak out. It's usually set up by a different third party where they don't have any contact with the participants. And usually medicines that will be going through the Food and Drug Administration here in the United States, that is going to be set up as a double-blind study using some type of a placebo. Okay, so let's move on to ethics. Ethics are always a hot topic in psychology and other social sciences. We know what ethics are, but sometimes it's hard to define them. And basically in psychology, these are the standards for proper and responsible behavior. We as psychologists follow specific guidelines by the American Psychological Association. They have set it up to where we know what we need to be doing when we are doing a psychological study. When you do research with people, there are a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. First of all, confidentiality. This includes all manners of communications, records. You have to keep the people who are involved in the research study confidential. You cannot refer to them in any way that someone would be able to identify who that participant is. That means in verbal communications and written communication. You also have to receive informed consent. This is where people agree or consent to participate in the research study. And this is only after they have been given a general overview of what the research entails and have been given a choice about whether or not they want to participate. This will also include any drawbacks or any known possible effects of being part of the research. So you may ask yourself, is it ever okay to deceive the subject? A lot of very, very famous research in psychology has been done where people did not know that they were being part of a research study, or they didn't really know the true intent of the research. Actually, yes, it is sometimes acceptable to deceive the subject. However, there are some rules that we still have to abide by. First of all, when you set it up, the researcher has to believe that the benefits of the research outweigh any potential harm. There can't be any great potential harm. There might be some stress involved or very brief discomfort, but the researchers also have to believe that the individuals would have been willing to participate if they had understood the benefits of the research. So if they had really had a true understanding of what they were involved in, they would have gone ahead and consented. So always after the conclusion of a research study involving human participants, those participants need to be able to be debriefed or receive an explanation after it has concluded. So what about research with animals? Psychologists only use animals if there is not an alternative and when they believe that the potential benefits outweigh the harm. Most animals are not harmed in psychological research. We do use animals in psychology class, not for research as much as for demonstrations. So we will not be injecting the pet rats with any type of drugs or anything like that. Is harming animals ethical? Okay. Here is where a lot of people have a lot of problems, and that is okay. But what you need to know is what the APA states for psychological research with animals. Sometimes we do rely on research with animals to avoid harming humans. And it's very important research that is being done on animals. Examples would include brain research, separating children from their parents and seeing the outcome. Looking at different mental disorders, visual and memory defects, high blood pressure. So you're doing research that will eventually benefit humanity, but you can't do the research directly with humans. Sometimes it is necessary and acceptable to harm animals, although it is always kept to as much of a minimum as possible. And an important thing to remember is when we talk about research with animals, if we already know the answer, we don't replicate that study. It is not considered ethical. When we use data, and most research has some type of data, we have to present all of the evidence, even if it contradicts the hypothesis. So if you are doing the research study that we were talking about earlier on a medication that is intended to help people with depression, if there are some very bad side effects, or even if they're moderate side effects, you have to disclose those side effects so that people have all of the information that they need to make a good decision. And you have to report it to the Food and Drug Administration. So just to kind of give an overview of the ethical issues of research that we discuss, we do everything that we can as researchers to protect study participants from harm. We maintain the scientific integrity of the study. We don't make allowances for people that we like. We are very strict and rigorous with our methodology. We promote the dignity of the individual. To the right of your screen, you're going to see some photographs from a very famous experiment that was done back in the early 70s. This depicts some people who were not behaving in the most ethical way, and their participants did not have their dignity maintained. Now, you have to remember that that study was conducted during a time when our ethical standards were different, and we'll talk more about that study at a later time. Continuing on with some of the ethical issues that we maintain during research, we foster human welfare and we maintain confidentiality of our participants. We do make sure that we obtain informed consent from all research participants. So, let's recap. In this video, you learned the experimental research method, how we can improve research findings, the relationship of validity and reliability to data analysis, ethical standards that psychologists have to follow regarding their research with human participants, and how psychologists use animal subjects in their psychological research in an ethical manner. In our next video, we are moving on to the bio units. I will see you in our next video. I can't wait to see you then. Bye for now.